Hello everyone, this is a video review of the cryptocurrency market for the private channel. And here we will be looking at altcoins. Today we'll try to go through them as quickly as possible. Why? Because there will be a lot of them, but at the same time our goal is not to open a position on any specific altcoin. Our goal is to understand the overall direction of the market. Since we currently have the Bitcoin chart open, we'll start with Bitcoin. Then I'll switch the layout to a different view so that we have 4 basic charts: monthly, weekly, daily, and 4-hour. After that, we'll continue the analysis with altcoins. So Bitcoin. Let's start with the monthly candles. Look, we have a break here of this overbought, oversold indicator heading downward. This suggests a decline. The August candle is doing the same thing. Of course, if in September, or rather in October, we engulf the August candle, then the situation could change to the exact opposite. But for now, on the monthly candles, this is a short story. Now let's look at the weekly candles right here. On the weekly candles, we have a long position here. First, the overbought, oversold indicator is pointing upward. Second, we have a weekly scale engulfing pattern. And accordingly, the target growth area is a new all-time high, because everything we could have reached has already been reached. Yes, we do have downside targets, and they are very likely to be met. These range from 102,000 down to 89. We have a very strong downside target around 80,000 on the monthly time frame. But it's too early to talk about that for now. The weekly candles are pointing toward growth. On the daily candles, look, the PP indicator is pointing upward. Here we have total bullish engulfing patterns, which also favor growth. There is not a single reason to go short. The 12-hour candles are already indicating strong overbought conditions, but again, we have neither downside targets according to the indicators nor any clear reasons for a reversal, because we do not see a single bearish engulfing pattern here. Not on the daily, not on the weekly, not on the 12-hour charts. The 4-hour candles seem to have formed a reversal. They have, and now we have a downside target in the 118,500 to 117,700 area. And even technically, the 4-hour candles are pointing downward. But what is concerning is this previous 4-hour candle. And besides, it contradicts the current situation, especially on the daily and weekly time frames. That's why I'm not rushing to talk about shorting. For now, this could just be a sideways movement. And let's hope that during this sideways phase, altcoins will show some significant growth. Also note that on the hourly candles, there are a lot of unfulfilled downside targets. This means that at some point, all these targets will be reached in one go, and a decline to the area of $115,000 is expected. Well, if we follow the lowest of the targets. Alright, we've sorted that out. Now let's proceed to switch all of this information and data to a new window that features a comprehensive display with 4 distinct time frames. Yes, indeed. Now let's make the necessary changes right here within this interface. We will meticulously set the primary time frame to a monthly view and the secondary time frame to a weekly view, ensuring a thorough analysis. Here we'll have daily, and here we'll have 4 daily. So we'll set auto bars here, auto bars, auto bars, auto bars, auto bars. Yes, they might look a bit off, but if needed, we'll adjust everything manually. So now we switch accordingly. Don't be confused by the abundance of drawing tools here. We'll fix all that now. Well, let's start with Ethereum. Now, at this very moment, I truly need to switch to the English keyboard layout, or to whichever specific layout I am required to switch to. Yes, I absolutely need to switch to English, but for some inexplicable reason, it is simply not switching. Well, I do know how to accomplish this with the keyboard, utilizing various hotkeys, but somehow that's not quite working correctly. Alright then. So Ethereum, look. Let's start with the monthly candles. The monthly candles here are just pointing straight up, no other options. On the weekly candles, yes, the overbought indicator suggests a decline, but the current weekly candle is at risk of forming a bullish engulfing pattern. That's in favor of growth. The daily candles are definitely signaling growth. On the 4-hour candles, a decline into the $4,300 to $4,230 range is possible. In other words, they're pretty overheated and at the moment are actually pointing toward a decline. Now let's keep going. I just hope I can do it, or maybe I can't. Hold on a second. I'll try to switch it some other way. Oh, I was wiping the keyboard and it just turned off on me, because it's off, but now everything should work. So, let's look at XRP, USDT, Ripple. Now we'll go through the top cryptocurrencies by market capitalization one by one. So let's see, what's up with Ripple? Well, Ripple is actually moving sideways and is pretty overheated from an indicator standpoint. There's a high probability it will close this gray zone. That's 1.50 to 1.95. Well, it's around 93 to 95. But right now, I don't see any clear signs of a decline. On the weekly candles, Ripple is actually in a short position here. Here, the engulfing pattern has completely absorbed this candle. Alright, let's move on. On the daily candles, it's along here. Ripple is growing here. On the 4-hour candles, again, a decline is expected to the area of 2.95 or slightly lower. Let's switch to BNB. Even though BNB isn't traded on QuantFury, we'll take a look just for the sake of the experiment. On the monthly candles, there's not a single reason to short. On the weekly candles, there's not a single reason to short. Here, the long continues. Yes, it's strongly overheated, but there are no clear reasons to short here. On the daily candles, the long continues, especially since we're not overbought. Well, BNB isn't overbought, although there are already unrealized downside targets. On the 4-hour candles, well, a decline is shaping up here, but again, it's somewhat debatable. It might happen or it might not. The daily charts definitely point to growth, as do the weekly and monthly charts, by the way. Let's keep going. By the way, if you didn't know, in TradingView you don't have to stop here when switching instruments. You can just start typing it in right away, the ticker. For example, USDT, Solana. What do we have here? For Solana we have monthly candles. Definitely in favor of growth. Weekly candles. Definitely, or maybe not so definitely. They're kind of... It's a debatable situation here, and there could be a decline. And if there is a decline, then it would be towards the 50-week moving average, which is $185. I'll round it off a bit, just so we don't get bogged down in the details. So, on the daily candles, as you can see, it's a long position with no other options at all. And the 4-hour candles allow for a decline, maybe somewhere into the area of these averages, $220 or maybe even a bit lower, around $210. Let's keep going. Dogecoin. USDT. Alright, Doge. Doge has a major downside target in the area of 7 cents. 0.069, 0.031. You can see these targets. Its closer target is somewhere around 13 to 11 cents. But it's actually quite oversold, strangely enough, on the monthly candles. And overall, this still favors growth more. So these targets will most likely be reached after some kind of growth. What kind of growth? I don't know. On the weekly candles, the situation is debatable. It seems like we've dropped below the 50-week moving average, but this current week might close above the 50-week again. As you can see, there's no overbought condition here. Let's move on. On the daily candles, it's along here. We've broken through this blue curve. When we break above it, it's a long. When we break below, it's a short. It's not a guarantee, but it's one of the indirect signs. And the 4-hour candles, again, are now clearly pointing towards a decline. A decline towards where? Well, to the area of 25 cents, I would say. Around 24.5, somewhere around there. Let's keep looking. Tron TRX USDT also isn't traded on QuantFury, but let's take a look. What's up with Tron? On the monthly time frame, Tron is clearly overheated. And it even slightly resembles a divergence. Yeah, we haven't updated here. Right now, we haven't updated the previous high. But the situation for a long here is very sketchy. Maybe it is a long, but I wouldn't enter such a long on monthly candles. The weekly chart clearly points to a decline. There are two targets, around 30 cents to 26 cents. On the daily candles, there are signs of growth here. But as long as we're below the 50-day moving average, this isn't growth. Because we broke below it and are now testing it from underneath. And until we break above it, there's no growth here, although there are hints of growth. On the 4-hour candles, everything here points to a decline down to around 34 cents. Now let's move on and see what's next. Let's take a look at Toncoin, Ton USDT. We'll check Toncoin on OKX since the chart there is longer. So look at this wild oversold condition on the monthly candles, but there's nothing indicating a long position. There is, however, one thing. The blue curve has moved toward the price, but the price hasn't moved toward the blue curve. When they start to converge, then we can talk about or at least assume growth, or at least them touching each other. That's around the area of $4 and up. But if we assume that some kind of growth is about to start now, though for now there are no clear signals for a short here, for a long here, so far the decline continues. The weekly candles here clearly indicate a short which remains in place, and there is not a single reason right now to take a long. Sure, it could shoot up in a single week to some crazy value, but technically there is no long here. Now the daily candles. But if we look at the daily candles, see, the blue curve is going down while the price is going up. Here there's an untraded overbought zone and the oversold indicators are pointing up, which suggests growth. That's why 2.95 is roughly the area where we should expect Altcoin in the near future. The 4-hour candles at the moment are indicating a decline. Here we have a downside target, but it's very local, 2.77. Well, everything is pretty much the same. That is, on almost all altcoins we can see that on the daily time frame it's an uptrend. And on some we even see growth on the monthly time frame. So now let's look at Cardano, ADA, USDT. So what do we have here? The monthly candles are signaling growth. They are definitely indicating it. The 50-month moving average has been broken, and there's a monthly scale engulfing pattern here in favor of growth. Yes, there is some downside target, and here it looks a bit odd, but you just need to increase the number of decimal places, and maybe it will look different. Although, no, it doesn't look different. Well, maybe it's some kind of technical glitch. It's not important. So Cardano is currently looking upward on the monthly candles. Hold on a second, everything shifted for me. On the weekly candles, Cardano is definitely looking downward here, but as long as the 50-week moving average hasn't been broken, it's too early to talk about shorting. But there is a target for a short. 72.5 cents and even down to 70 cents. The daily candles clearly indicate growth. The blue curve has been broken and we've reached the nearest growth target. We're trading above all the moving averages. The PP indicator is pointing upward. The 4-hour candles suggest a decline to the 84-cent area, 81.5 all the same. So it looks like on the 4-hour chart we might see a correction. But overall we should continue upward. Now let's move on. Where do we have Link? Let's take a look at Link USDT. Link. So where exactly did all of our important indicators actually go here in this particular situation? I don't get it. Here they are. So regarding Link, the PP indicator is pointing upward. We have a bullish engulfing, or rather a breakout from the flat, but with engulfing patterns. There's growth here. On the monthly candles, there's growth. On the weekly candles, there's a definite decline. A decline to where? To the area of the 50-week moving average at $18.50. So, on the daily candles, the 4, there are signs of growth, but as long as we're below the 50-day moving average, here it is, the green one, it's too early to talk about growth. Although there are some prerequisites for it, only after closing above the 50-day can we talk about it with any real confidence. On the 4-hour chart, the situation is still pointing downward, and the nearest downside target is right here at $22 or $21.95. Let's move on. This is what we have in QuantFury. As for SUI, here's the situation. In fact, it's a sideways trend. From the perspective of candlestick structure, this is a long. But this blue curve is getting very close. We might test it. So the sideways movement could continue. But the situation here is uncertain. I wouldn't say it's a long or a short. On the weekly time frame, the situation looks more short-oriented. But pay attention, right now we risk closing above the 50-week moving average, and that might not be a short anymore. On the daily time frame, let's take a closer look, but the situation here is bullish. It's bullish. We closed above all the moving averages and even had a retest of the averages after breaking through them. The PP is pointing upwards, but overall the situation here is more bullish. But we could still drop into this area around 3.44 to 3.35. There's a large untraded chunk left here, this gray zone. So, and on the 4-hour chart, things are generally pointing down at the moment. I wouldn't say it's a short, but it's more likely to go down from the 3.49 level all the way to that same gray zone, and also the 50 period at 3.30. The situation here is basically slippery. I would refrain from entering the market. AVAX. So I think we can wrap it up. Overall, the picture is clear. After all, our goal wasn't to open positions. So weekly candles, monthly ones. According to the monthly candles, AVAX is looking upward. If it also closes above the blue curve, the 50-month moving average, look, it's right next to it, then that's a definite move up. And what's more, right now a growth target is forming. This is a strong target in the area of 32.15. Yes, that's a couple of dollars above the current market, but it's a sign in itself that the cryptocurrency is ready to grow. That is, the target isn't a stopping point. We could go much further than the target. Weekly candles. Here, the situation is actually risky. It suggests that we could go down, especially since last week was red after setting a new high. The situation here is very borderline. On the daily time frame, the situation is also debatable, but it somehow leans more toward growth, not a decline. And we also have a certain level of oversold conditions. The 4-hour chart says at the moment. They seem to indicate a move down, but overall it's a flat trend. But this downward move could at least test the 50-period moving average at 29.60. Overall, look, the situation is the same everywhere. The weekly chart is a bit more pronounced, but it's still debatable. The daily candles almost everywhere indicate growth, even though they're technically pointing down. The monthly chart overall probably leans a bit more toward growth. And the 4-hour chart probably leans more toward a decline. That's the story we have right now. Well, let's take a look at a couple more and then we'll wrap up. Let's check out Litecoin, a popular cryptocurrency, LTC over USDT. We'll look at one or two more after that and then finish up. So, Litecoin, what do we have for Litecoin? On the monthly candles, the 50-month moving average was broken a long time ago and the overall direction is upward. So on the monthly chart, you can see there were a lot of growth targets and we've hit all of them. Overall, it looks like a continuation. On the weekly candles, the state is neutral in terms of being overbought, and last week's engulfing candle also favors growth. We're trading above all the moving averages, and there's a bullish crossover between the red 100-week and the orange 200-week moving averages. On the daily candles, we've broken through the blue curve, broken through the 50-day moving average. This is definitely in favor of growth. There's not a single reason against it. Well, maybe one reason. The gray zone, and there could be a retest of the 100-day moving average, but overall this points to growth. Right here and now, it's for growth, even on the 4-hour chart. But there is a downside target in the area of $113.50 to $112. Overall though, the situation is still more in favor of growth, but pay attention. The price is going down. Just a trend, it's been going down over the last few sets of candles. The blue curve is going up. That's not a guarantee that they'll meet, but there's a chance, and the meeting zone is exactly this orange downside target, around $113. So we might see some downward movement in the market right now, both for Bitcoin and altcoins, but overall it still looks more bullish. Now let me see what else I like. DOT, Uni, Avia, Aptos. Well, let's check Uni. It's very volatile. Let's see what Uni says, and we'll finish on Uni. So Uni is just moving sideways on the monthly time frame, as you can see. The situation is debatable, but there is a growth target. Look, maybe you don't understand what this is? Oh no, we've already hit that target. It appeared, and we reached it right away the following month. Let's skip this. It's unclear, but here it's a sideways trend. It's a sideways trend here, and this sideways movement could go down as well. Don't assume that it will definitely go up. On the weekly time frame, the blue curve has been broken downward and all the moving averages have been broken downward as well. The PP indicator is pointing down, which suggests a decline. So the weekly candles here indicate that going long is extremely dangerous, and you should only consider going long when it closes above all the moving averages. For now, going long here is very risky, extremely risky. On the other hand, the daily candles suggest growth, with the PP indicator pointing upward. The 200-day moving average has been broken in the opposite direction after previously dropping below it. There is an untraded zone and there are growth targets. Here is one and another in the area of 9.18 and 8.60. And at the very least up to the 300-day moving average, here it is the blue dashed line, or to the 100-day, which is at 9.30. But Uni is most likely going to rise. But again, a decline is also forming here. This decline could reach the downside target of 7.90. Well, and to the 50 period on the 4-hour chart, that's 7.75. That's the story. Let's wrap it up here. Subscribe to the channel and leave your comments. You're in the private channel, so you can write your comments in the chat. But overall, the situation looks like more of a long on alts. A lot will depend on the stock market, because the stock market is once again on the verge of serious overheating. I wouldn't say it's extreme, but everything depends on the stock market in the sense that if it crashes, the crypto market will just collapse like a house of cards. That's all for now. Next, we'll be recording videos on Bitcoin, and I plan to do a review on Tesla today as well, but it will be more detailed and not as quick. Goodbye.